Good evening, Tulane parents. This is Penny Wyatt. I'm the Director of Parent Programs and External Relations for the Division of Student Affairs. And I'm very happy that you have joined us for our commencement preparation webinar tonight. This is an exciting time in your student's life, and we want this visit to Tulane and New Orleans to go smoothly for you so that you can enjoy this wonderful celebration with your student and the rest of your family and their friends. So we've put together some information here to guide you through the weekend, just to kind of help you navigate this visit, since we know that you may be coming with multiple other family members or have several generations of folks with you, and you're trying to get to different events and get around town and all of that. So we are going to share some information with you tonight. Before we get started, I want to just go over a few logistical things so that you'll kind of know how this will work tonight. Since many of you are parents of seniors, I would imagine that you have participated with us in some other webinars, but I just want to let you know that we will go through all the slides, and our slides usually do have more text than you would usually see on a PowerPoint presentation. What might be considered best practice for an in-person presentation, but a lot of our parents tell us that they like to scroll back through the slides later to capture the information or review it instead of listening to the whole video or watching that again. So we try to just make them pretty explicit. So there will be a lot of information here on the slides, but I will email the slides to you and the link to the recording probably by tomorrow afternoon. And then either by Friday or Monday, they'll be in our webinar archive on parents.tulane.edu. So you will be able to get this information again. So I would say kind of sit back and don't worry too much about taking notes, and just kind of absorb the information, and hold your questions until the end. We'll cue you when we get to that point so that you can start typing in your questions. We've tried to anticipate your questions. We've done this webinar for about 4 years now, so we take last year's questions and try to use those to improve the webinar each year. So another thing to remember is that you are not mic'd, so you won't be able to ask questions within the webinar, so that's why you can type in your questions later. So another thing to know is that this is the volume of the webinar. You can adjust the volume on your side, on your computer, so keep that in mind. So I want to just make sure that all of you can see the screen. It says commencement preparation, and it's got photos of 4 fabulously decorated mortar boards. So if you can see that, please raise your hand. That will also let me know that you can definitely hear everything, because you wouldn't know I'd ask that question if you couldn't hear the audio. Okay, that's great. So I'm glad you can see everything. Thank you for answering. Just so that we get an idea too of how you all are distributed, raise your hand if your student is in the School of Architecture. Let's just see how we're distributed there. Okay, now raise your hand if your student is in the School of Business. Okay, how about then liberal arts? Any of those liberal arts majors? Okay, and the School of Professional Advancement? Anybody? The next one is public health. Do we have any public health grads coming up here? Okay. And then science and engineering. Any of you guys out there? Okay. Thank you. That's helpful for us just to get an idea. So I am very pleased to have with me 2 colleagues who are our panelists for tonight. Valerie Robinson is an events consultant who has worked with coordinating both the Wave Goodbye Party and the Unified Commencement Ceremony for 18 years now. So she's just a wealth of information. I'm so excited that she's with us tonight. And Kate Simon works with Campus Services, and she coordinates the Grad Fest event that happens here on campus for students to get prepared. So we do this kind of virtual event for you through the webinar for parents, and then she has one in person that is held over 2 days to help the students get their ducks in a row. And we like to tell you about that so you can encourage them to make the most of that. So they will be our main speakers tonight. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you right off the bat that we don't have a confirmation of the Unified Commencement speaker yet. So we'll talk more about that later, but watch your emails for that. We think that the announcement will be made mid-March. So we're going to go through this set of topics. So we'll start with Grad Fest, which, as I mentioned, is the preparation for students. Then we'll talk about lodging and rental car resources and some of those other kind of logistical things to help you prepare in advance for your visit. And then we'll talk through all the commencement weekend events. I do want to stress that this webinar will focus on the undergraduate school ceremonies. I don't do regular communications to the parents of the professional school students and grad students. So if you are the parent of a person in one of those schools, then this may not be as helpful to you. So I just want you to kind of know that up front. But those folks are also involved in the unified ceremony, so you may find some information here that's helpful. Then we will talk about the wrapping up process if your students live on campus. How about raising your hand if your students do still live on campus and they'll need to check out of the residence halls and take care of some of those things. Okay, so we have a few of you, so we'll go through those and those details pretty quickly for you. And then we want to also talk to you about how your student really stays connected to Tulane even after graduation. So we're going to share some Tulane Alumni Association resources, and then we'll have a chance for the Q&A. So we're going to start now with Grad Fest. So I'll turn things over to Kate.
All right, so as Penny said, my name is Kate Simon. I'm Assistant Director of Campus Services here at Tulane, which is the office that puts on Grad Fest every year. As you can see here, Grad Fest is next week. It is Tuesday and Wednesday from 11 to 6 in the Qatar Ballroom in the LBC in the Student Center. We really encourage you to encourage your students, if at all possible, to go. They can do everything they need to do right in that one room to get ready for graduation. And it's just a lot easier than them trying to kind of pick up all the pieces after the event is over. We will have information for students who aren't able to attend, but like I said, please encourage your students to attend Grad Fest next week, if at all possible. So what will they be doing at Grad Fest? They'll purchase their cap and gown, their regalia. That is required. If they're going to be walking in Tulane's commencement in any of those commencement ceremonies, they have to have regalia and it has to be purchased from Tulane. They can order their Tulane ring. Your student can purchase a diploma frame to show off their Tulane diploma. They can order personalized graduation announcements. They can take a free cap and gown portrait proof with a professional photographer. And so how that works is the sitting fee is waived, and then after about a week to 10 days, they'll receive proofs through their email that then you can choose to purchase at that point. They can visit with Alumni Relations and learn about joining the Alumni Association and kind of all the benefits attached to that. And they can participate in the Graduating Student Survey and make a donation to seniors for the Tulane Fund. So with the cap and gown for bachelor's students, these are the prices. Like I said, to walk in commencement, they need to have that cap, gown, and tassels. So that's the $65 charge up there. Your student will purchase and actually take home their entire regalia, their cap, gown, and tassel at Grad Fest. They'll pick that up next week and bring it home with them. To avoid wrinkles or missing tassels, we ask that you remind your students, and we'll remind them too, to take it out of the bag and hang it up by the Thursday before commencement, just to kind of let all those wrinkles fall out. The tassel is in the plastic bag. Students walk out thinking it's not, and they lose it or they throw it away, but it is there, we promise you. Like I said, regalia, Tulane regalia is required to participate in commencement. If your student's not able to attend Grad Fest or has any questions, the bookstore here on campus is the place to ask those questions.
And so if they are on an internship or away because they have an interview or something,
Right.
they're away, they can make that up with the bookstore.
Right. They can call or email to place that order if they're not able to attend and pick that up next week. So next about the Tulane ring. So this is Tulane's very own specially designed class ring, and GradFest next week is actually the deadline to order the ring before graduation if your student wants to have that before commencement or as a gift to give them on commencement. We have multiple styles and metals to choose from, men's and women's rings, and prices start at around $400 for kind of the basic style. So to view those rings, to view those options, you can go to that URL right there. And like we say in the bottom, it does make a great graduation present. So if your student's not going to order it next week, you can definitely order it for them online or over the phone if you want to make it a surprise. And all that information's there on that website.
And they'll be able to see all the different styles and have ring sizing.
Yep, so next week they'll be able to try on rings, they'll be able to get sized. And even if they can't attend GradFest next week, our bookstore always has a ring sizer, so they can get sized there as well. So next we have diploma frames. We have a few different vendors and a few different styles available. They'll all be available to look at GradFest next week. It's also on our website, so on the bookstore website you can view all of that as well. The prices are right there. They range from about $150 to $250 depending on the style of the frame and mat chosen. So students can purchase them and take them home with them next week, but they can also choose to have them shipped probably to your permanent address. So like I said, we'll have two different vendors there next week, Churchill Classics and Framing Success. They'll both be there to help your student make those purchases. We'll also we have personalized graduation announcements, so you can send those out on behalf of your student. A lot of students don't understand why they need to order them, and we just tell them to ask their parents because parents usually want them. And we recommend that your student orders those at GradFest with the representative from the company, just so that they can make sure to get all of those details correct. The pricing is available if you click right there at that link, so you can kind of see what those different packages are going to cost. You can also order them online, but like I said, if your student can make it to GradFest, that's probably the place to do it because it's a lot easier to do it with somebody who kind of understands the system. Like I said, our cap and gown portraits. So Candid Campus Photography is the photographer who will be at GradFest next week to take those proofs. They will provide a cap and gown, so your student doesn't have to buy it, take it out of the bag, put it on, and then try and remember to bring it all home with them. We'll also provide shirts and ties for any male students who don't have their own. We recommend that students arrive properly groomed for a picture and just dress for a portrait session. So it's best that students don't wear hoodies or turtlenecks or anything with a large neckline that's going to interfere with the cap and gown fitting properly. And like I said earlier, within about 7 to 10 business days, students will receive an email with the link to view their proofs and a way to purchase their photos right online right there. So that'll be about a week and a half after the event. And so if your student can't attend GradFest, it's not the end of the world. They can go to our website, gradfest.tulane.edu, for more information. Caps and gowns can always be purchased at the Uptown Bookstore, in the LBC, or on the phone or by email. We do start to charge a $30 late fee for all orders that are placed after April 13th because at that point it is considered a rush order. So we ask that you ask your students to order your cap and gown before then so you don't get charged that late fee. If your student isn't able to take photos or if they don't like their photos that they take next week at GradFest, we will have the photographer back on campus on Thursday, April 5th in the same room in the Student Center from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Like I said, you can order announcements online at balfour.com or over the phone at that phone number right there. And the Tulane ring as well, you can order that online or over the phone if your student doesn't order next week. And so as you and your family and friends are coming into New Orleans to see your student graduate and to walk in commencement, we have some relationships with local hotels and bed and breakfasts. They actually give you a special Tulane rate. And those links are right there on the PowerPoint. You can click there and kind of see where on the map all of those hotels are, and you can book your hotel right there in the website, kind of like using Expedia or something like that. It's super easy. We also have special rates with Enterprise. So if you're planning on renting a car while you're here in New Orleans, we have all the information about that on our website. As Penny says here on the slide, there are a lot of conferences and conventions in New Orleans. There's always stuff going on here. So if you're planning on booking a hotel room and haven't done it yet, we suggest that you do it sooner rather than later. If you have any issues with the booking tools for either the hotels or Enterprise, you can call us there at that number, 504-865-5441.
So let's get a show of hands about that. How many of you have not booked your hotel reservations? Let's see, and this is private. Nobody else is going to see this but us. So hey, you all are doing really well. You get an A+. So, okay. Next slide. So we're going to start moving into kind of the description of events. So I'm going to just quickly give you the overview. So there will be some things that start on Friday, May 18th. If your student is in Navy ROTC or Army ROTC, they have some commissioning ceremonies, and so the information is there. Now they will be giving that information to your students, but they also shared it with me, so we can just put this out here on the schedule. The A.B. Freeman School of Business undergraduate diploma ceremony does happen on Friday as well, so it's Friday at 10 on campus. There'll be some more details in subsequent slides. And there is a Newton Tulane College Senior Awards ceremony that happens on that Friday afternoon. It is by invitation only. It's in that kind of 2-hour time block right before wave goodbye. So if you plan to come in for that, then you may be able to go to that if your student is one of the students who's receiving an award. They do not make those final determinations until later in the spring. So it is an event that is mostly for the students and faculty because they're different like department awards and academic awards of those kind of types. So I wouldn't worry too much if you've planned your arrival time a little bit differently, but we wanted to let you know that those things are happening. So it's especially important for those students who are in the business school to know that your student's diploma ceremony is at 10 a.m. on Friday. And then Friday evening, it's the big wave goodbye party. We'll give you a lot more fun information about that event in a second. And then on Saturday morning, the unified commencement ceremony happens. So that's for all of the students at Tulane. So it's one big fabulous ceremony. And then the other undergraduate schools ceremonies where they actually receive their diploma and they walk across the stage, those are later on Saturday. And then if your student lives on campus, they have to vacate their residence halls by 12 on Sunday. So I'm going to turn things over to Valerie now to describe more about these other big events that we have.
All right, so the Wave Goodbye Party is a really fabulous time. You get to mix and mingle with your friends and family and other students and their families. It's an outdoor event, so of course we're at the mercy of the weather, but it's usually warm. And, you know, sometimes we've had a little bit of rain, but it's still always a really great event. We have live music, and we have, if you've ever been to Jazz Festival or any festival in New Orleans, it's set up sort of like Jazz Fest with food booths that offer different kinds of New Orleans cuisine. We have 2 entrances. One is on Ferret Street and one is faces St. Charles at the Gibson Circle. So, you know, you can enter either way. It does get really crowded, so I would suggest you come early. Sometimes we run out of food, you know, toward the end. So wear casual clothes and comfortable shoes because you are outside mostly on a grass surface that is a little bit uneven sometimes. Every student gets 7 e-tickets and they can download those, and any unused tickets they can share with somebody else, or sometimes, you know, everybody prints out the 7 and, you know, and they share and switch and things like that. So the tickets do have to be printed out and they have to be presented on site because this is not open to anyone except for the students and their families. One of the things that's been added in the last few years is that the Alumni Association sets up an alumni station in Cudd Hall, which is one of the buildings on the quad, and they get a free gift, a limited edition poster, and they take a photo and they meet the alumni relations staff and learn about how they can stay in touch, and also with the alumni career services.
And I just want to add, that's a limited edition poster. It's specially commissioned, and so it's different each year. So this one would be especially for the class of 2018. And then a fabulous graduation present if a parent wants to take it home and frame it for your student to put in their, their home after they graduate. So I have a friend who did that for their student, and it was really lovely.
So parking will be available on campus. It is limited. You don't have to have a special permit, but there isn't enough parking on campus for everyone. We have the streetcar running, so a lot of people like to take the streetcar up here and back downtown. And so we do ask that everybody respect the reserved parking spaces, because those are reserved all hours. So just don't park in those. There will be other spots available, and also along the street. So we're going to get into the actual unified ceremony. It begins at 9 a.m. That's on Saturday, March 19th at the Superdome. Students need to be there by 8 a.m. to line up with their school. The Superdome is really big, so it's important that they get there on time and get where they're supposed to go, so they're in place and ready to line up, because they actually start the procession about 45 minutes before it starts, because they have to come from a different level and wind down through tunnels, and it takes a long time when you've got hundreds of thousands of students that are doing that. So the doors open at 7:30, and we start live music at 8:30. The procession starts at 9 a.m. It takes usually 25-30 minutes for everybody to get in and get seated, so the ceremony starts usually right around 9:30. It's very much a New Orleans event, and it's very festive, but still a very dignified event. And as was mentioned earlier, we are confirming the speaker right now and should have that within a week or so. So you can check back on, the commencement.tulane.edu website to see who it is.
And also, if you're not already subscribed to these other two publications, then the links are there so that you can get those, and usually a really nice write-up in each of those, and usually the president also mentions something about it in one of his weekly Buford Gibson messages. So join those if you're not already in that subscription.
When you're at the Superdome, well, before you get to the Superdome, make sure that your student has official Tulane regalia, including the tassel, in order to walk. If they show up without a robe, they're not going to be able to process. It happens pretty much every year, and it's a very difficult thing to have to handle. So have them take it out of the robe, out of the package, and let the wrinkles fall out. The material is, I would suggest not ironing it, because you could scorch it. Make sure you leave your hotel or wherever you're staying early enough to get to the Superdome. The traffic does back up trying to get into the parking garages, so you don't want to leave too late and then maybe miss the beginning of the ceremony. One suggestion is to have your students stay with you in the hotel so you can come together, and that would make it a lot easier, because you'll know where your student's going and they'll know where you're going, and it'll make a lot more sense. We do run shuttles from the Tulane campus starting at 7 a.m. so you can also park up here on campus and take that shuttle. It will run continuously throughout the day. So if you are there in the morning, and even if you're going to stay for the liberal arts ceremony, you could still get back in the afternoon. we'll have more detailed information on that as we go. The doors do open at 7:30. Try to get there before 8:30. It gets very crowded. We have a lot of seating, but it fills up quickly, so we want to make sure that everybody gets a good view. Wear comfortable shoes. The Superdome is very large, and you may have to walk a good bit from where you're parked into the dome and then to where the seating is. Parking is $15 and it's cash only. So remember that also can run into a problem, particularly if you and your student are coming separately and everybody's got to get paid for it. You have to have $15 in cash. And you can park there all day with that $15. Again, if you're going to be there for the social work ceremony or for the liberal arts ceremony, you can stay there all day. You can actually, you'll get a little placard thing to put in your windshield, and you can actually leave if you were going to go to lunch and come back, and you wouldn't have to pay again. You will not be able to go on the Superdome floor. That is only for the students. And the website it will have all the information that you need. And I think we have a slide coming up that will kind of show you where the parents enter and where the students enter, because they're across the Superdome from each other. And there will be a bookstore set up there, and they will sell all the Tulane branded items there at where the parents will enter, and they'll be in the Superdome for that ceremony. If students are receiving degrees from more than one academic school, the students have to choose to attend one ceremony or the other, typically with the friends that they want to be with on commencement day. They usually use that choice, but they may buy both diplomas if they choose. So at Grad Fest, the students will get the weekend schedule, so they'll be able to purchase their regalia for the events that they're going to attend. Pictures are also taken at the individual school graduation ceremonies when students walk across the stage and receive their diplomas. So we do not take individual school pictures during Unified. Everybody they confer the degrees like on a school at that point, and later they'll walk across the stage. This is a diagram of the bowl of the Superdome, and as you can see, the undergraduate students will enter at gate G, and then the parents and guests and the professional students will enter at gate C, and as you can see, they're directly across from each other, but that's a big space. You have garages on either side, so there are several ways to get into those gates.
And then note the drop-off zone for folks who are in wheelchairs. So
yes, that'll be on the ground level at gate A, the drop-off for wheelchairs, and that's right next to where the entrances to the garage are. So it's kind of hard to figure that out just by looking at this if you've never been to the Superdome, but it's a very large facility and there is a lot of walking involved. Wheelchairs is always an issue, again, because the space is so large. We have people who are volunteering to move people in wheelchairs. We have about 30 wheelchairs available to us, and we have volunteers that can put somebody in a wheelchair at the gate A ground entrance and move them to their seat. They will come back at the end of the ceremony to move the wheelchair back to gate A ground level. Everyone has to kind of figure out where they're going to meet. There's seating available for one additional guest in a folding chair next to the disabled seat. And then we try to keep 2 rows in front of that seating reserved for guests who are mobile, but they can't walk all the way down all the steps to another level for seating. But that does run out, so again, if you are with someone in a wheelchair particularly, please get there early so we can get you in and seated. Again, the handicap seating fills up very quickly. If you have a large group of people, only the guest who needs assistance and one companion is able to use the elevators to go up, and other guests will have to find seats in the general seating. But they should determine ahead of time where to meet the family after the ceremony has concluded. These are just a couple of places where if you want to rent a wheelchair, you can rent them at Mr. Wheelchair or Total Health Solutions, and and get them picked up and use that for the ceremony, and you'll be able to keep that through the entire ceremony.
And it's just really important to note that if your person needs to remain seated in a wheelchair during the whole ceremony and not sit in a regular seat, then you will need to bring you'll need to bring their own wheelchair with you or rent one for that time. So we want to just provide these options for you to look at that are local. So this just shows you the undergrad ceremonies in chronological order, so you can kind of see how it flows, and you can kind of get that sense of which one your student's in, so you can see those. And then we'll give you a little bit more detail about each specific one.
So School of Architecture.
So they actually have their reception first, and it is at 2 o'clock to 2:30. So that might seem kind of weird that the reception's first, but that's the way that's set up. It does have light food and drinks. That happens at Richardson Memorial Hall, which is on campus in the lobby there, and then their actual graduation ceremony starts at 4. So that shows you, kind of how that's set up and how much time you have between the Unified Commencement Ceremony and the first event there, that's the reception. So you've got a 11:30 to 2 o'clock kind of window of time. And Valerie, does that seem correct that by the time the first ceremony is over, the Unified Commencement Ceremony is probably about 11:30?
It's usually just right around 11 o'clock, but again, you've got to then all the egress and meeting up with your student and all those kinds of things. And getting your card will definitely be 11:30.
Okay. So then the next one is the Freeman School of Business. So do note, this one's on Friday. So that's here on campus though. It's at 10 o'clock in the morning, but the doors open at 9 for guests to get seated. So you will see here some more details about what will happen there and some contact information if you have further questions about that particular ceremony. And then there will be a reception afterwards on that Friday. So tickets are not required for the students for that event. I don't think any of the individual undergraduate school activities require a ticket. The only thing that's ticketed is the wave goodbye party on Friday. So you'll be able to refer back to these details later on. And just note especially about the parking on campus on Friday. There would already be, faculty and staff who are here on Friday at that time, at 10 or 9 if you have to get here by then. So you might want to use a cab or, other kind of car service if you're coming with a business school student for that ceremony. And there is the information for the liberal arts undergrad ceremony. So Valerie, talk about this one because that happens in the Superdome as well. So talk to them about how that kind of works.
Yeah, so the School of Liberal Arts will graduate. There will be a short break while we kind of get things reorganized for this ceremony. There is food available in the Superdome. You can, if you're going to stay there, which is recommended because of the time allowed. They do have food in the Superdome, and it's stadium food, it's not a fine meal, but you might want to save that for later in the day. You cannot bring backpacks into the Superdome. Make sure your student knows not to bring a backpack. They will confiscate it when they enter. They do check bags. There's no restriction on size of the bags, although I wouldn't recommend bringing a really large bag. And this year, for the first time, due to new Homeland Security rules, every guest has to go through a metal detector, not a wand thing you just walk through like you do at the airport. So it shouldn't take a lot of time, but just to remember that that's a standard procedure. The students will have to stay. They will not be able to leave and come back because they've got to get them, again, re-lined up and ready to go for their procession. And they will report to the St. Charles Club in the Superdome, which is another level up from where you will be seated. And I'm not sure exactly what the time that they'll ask them to be there. They'll probably ask them to be there 12. Okay,
yeah.
11:30, I'm sorry, yes. Okay. So that they will need to go directly from the Unified Ceremony to find the St. Charles Club Lounge and meet there with other Willard students.
Now they do provide them with some light refreshments to kind of tide them over until the reception's over. I know I had a mom talk to me last year about how their student would just faint if they didn't have anything to eat before 8 in the morning until after that ceremony. So the students would be okay. They do have, some light refreshments to kind of get them through that. And then you may want to, after that reception, have more of a early dinner or something with your family. But they'll have a little bit of light food in that time while they're getting lined up. So that's information for liberal arts. So for the School of Professional Advancement, their graduation ceremonies in McAllister Auditorium on campus at 1. So that's not a lot of time between the getting out of the Superdome, say 11:30ish, and then having to be over here by 12 to line up. So we talked with the coordinators of that event, and they said that students and families may want to just plan to grab a quick bite in the LBC at the food court between ceremonies and just kind of look at that as kind of a snack to kind of get them through, and then maybe plan your other more celebratory meals outside of that time. But you'll need to kind of pay attention to that sort of short turnaround time between events. There will be a reception following the ceremony, but details are still being finalized, so you can check back for more details on that. And then the School of Public Health and Tropical Medicine's graduation ceremony is at the Hyatt Regency. Do you want to tell them about sort of how close that is to Superdome, Valerie?
It would be walkable if you wanted to. I would suggest that you if you're parked in the Superdome, take a cab and come back and get your car. Parking would take a good bit of time, and you again have to pay another fee.
The shuttles will also be running to these off-site locations as well. So the Tulane shuttles will be running from the Dome to the Hyatt.
Okay. So if you look on a map, they'll look like they're right next to each other, but they're both really large buildings. And It's not that the doors are immediately facing each other. So so that's why we just suggest that you allow enough time if you think you can make that walk, or take a cab or take a shuttle. So that's some information about that one. And then the School of Science and Engineering undergrad ceremony will happen at 4 p.m. in the Abercrombie Fogelman Arena in Dublin Fieldhouse. So that's on the Uptown campus. It's at the corner of McAllister Place and Ferret Street. And so the check-in time for that is at 3 o'clock. So you'll see there that the students have to check in and get lined up. And at the same time, the field house opens for the guests to get seated. So you can arrive at the same time that your student does. And then the ceremony will start at 4 o'clock. And then it'll end, and they'll proceed out of that space. So I think that group probably has the longest lunch break. So you can probably fit in lunch reservations at a restaurant between those two events. So for those of you whose students are still living on campus, there will be some things they need to do to wrap up on campus. So I just want to kind of mention these so you can kind of check in with your student about these. So they would need to forward their mail. There's an online form they can use for that. Now, if they're living off campus and they're going to be moving right away, don't let them forget to submit, just the regular change of address form with the U.S. Postal Service, so they make sure they get all their mail. If they need to pack up their belongings and ship them, then remember that every year FedEx office sets up a satellite station in the University Center to help students, weigh their boxes, and they sell the boxes, and they'll, help them wrap everything up and get those things, put off into FedEx. If they want to use that service, they try to make it easy for them. They even have, dollies and hand trucks to help students, get those things over from their residence hall, into the space in the LBC to submit it to be shipped. And then I know last year we had some parents who asked about, what if my student is living off campus, but they're going to go somewhere for a couple of months and then they're going to start their new job in August, or they're going to go on to graduate school later. Can they store things here? So we would just share with you this information that we offer for students who are looking for storage between their academic years. That Summertime Storage, this company that we recommend and have worked with successfully for several years, will also provide shorter term storage for graduating seniors, so their contact information is there. Now, it's not prorated by a monthly rate because most of the work, of course, for them is in the picking the items up and redelivering them or delivering them to a different location later, in town. But if that is the situation your student's in, that might be really helpful practical resource for you to consider. So other things then, if they are living on campus, they do have to officially check out by 12 noon on Sunday. And they should start thinking about that move and process a few weeks out, especially if they can start thinking about it before they're in the midst of their last semester's final exams and all those kinds of things. It's really smart for them to think ahead and plan everything around, their final exams and packing and, being available to visit with, you and the other family members. So they just need to be organized. So they will have to schedule a checkout appointment with their RA, or they have to do an express checkout. They can elect to do the express checkout, but that means that they are not going over the room condition in person with the RA, and if anything is noticed that they could be billed for, they don't have a chance to talk with the RA about that. So there's it's kind of like you kind of take what you get if you do the express checkout. So you want to make sure that you encourage them to allot that time to actually make that checkout appointment with the RA so they can go over everything together. So they'll have a way to set up that schedule with their RA on their floor. They should talk to their roommates to make sure that they kind of collaborate to make sure the room is clean, because you don't want the first person kind of checking out and leaving all the mess left over for the second person to have to deal with. So it does take some cooperation and communication between roommates. So it'll go really smoothly if they've just taken time to remove everything, reset the room furniture the way it's supposed to be, and make sure it's just sort of at least swept clean. Basically clean before they leave. So a few other things to note. The diplomas, this is still correct. I believe they'll be shipped 3 to 4 weeks. They get their diploma case kind of, or a folder when they walk across the stage, but then it's actually mailed to them, and it's mailed to the address that's in their formal official permanent home address that's listed in Gibson Online. So if that's different, they should update that tab on their Gibson Online account to make sure their address is correct. And then some parents have asked about where there may be listings of the graduates. So they're published in the Times-Picayune and the Advocate, which are the 2 local newspapers. But if a student elected the confidentiality clause in their student information, then it would not be published in that listing. Couple other things to note, that the bookstore will be open from 8:30 to 5 on Friday and Saturday 9 to 5. If you still want to pick up some more fantastic Tulane sweatshirts and hats and all of that stuff before your student graduates. And then the last thing that we want to tell you about is really important, that your student can stay connected to Tulane, and there's a really easy way for them to register with this Tulane Connect system to take advantage of networking opportunities. That's really helpful. They can stay connected to each other and to other years of alumni. So that's a smart thing to do. And then we especially want to encourage them to look to get involved with Tulane clubs that are all across the U.S. and abroad. This is a great thing for the students to do. And our alumni Tulane clubs are totally free. And while they really do want the students to keep their information updated so that if they move from job to job and city to city, that they can still be in touch with the Alumni Association. So there's a way they can update that information online. And the Alumni Affairs folks told me today that to let them know that they don't sell this list to anybody. They're not solicited for people trying to sell them things. It's just communication from Tulane and the Alumni Association to keep them kind of connected to the university and to each other. And so those Tulane clubs are a great thing for a student to consider getting involved with if they're moving to a new city. It gives them a way to meet some other people, either other young new professionals like they are and recent grads, or just another way to kind of connect in an organization that's sort of multi-generational, so they can also meet people who are established there in that city or who have families, and just can make them feel like they're building connections in a new place. And they do everything from host social events, like they almost always have crawfish boils, and we ship the crawfish to them from New Orleans to all of these different Tulane clubs. They will have a Mardi Gras party. They might get together to watch games that are broadcast. They'll do happy hours. They'll do networking events. Sometimes there'll be guest speakers who are Tulane faculty who will come to talk to a club, or they'll do service projects together. So there's a lot of different clubs, and sometimes the activity level of the club depends on sort of who's volunteered to be those leaders. That's another leadership development opportunity for students when they're getting out of the university and they're starting their first job. It's kind of nice to have some other organizations that you can get involved in. So definitely encourage your student to take advantage of that resource. And then for those of you who might have younger students here at Tulane, if you're type A planners and you want to know those future commencement dates, they are there on the screen for 2019 and 20. And so every few years they'll be added to on that commencement webpage. And so especially if you want to book your hotels really far in advance, there's some information for you. You do have to note that individual hotels may vary in terms of how far in advance they will let you book. But it's always worth asking, I think, if you already know the dates you need to be here. So, so now is the time when you can submit your questions. I did want to point out that that new URL for the commencement website is changed. It's now commencement.tulane.edu, and it's been reorganized and updated to be even more user-friendly. So we encourage you to look there for all of this information and for updates about the speaker and just more detail that will be added about some of the events. And if you have questions about commencement after you've reflected on all of this and you've gotten the information, the slides to review, then there's a dedicated email address for you to send those questions. So it's tugrad@tulane.edu. So we would love to take your questions. If you want to type those in on your side, we will start going through those. I did want to note that for those of you who are really adept on social media, you can use that hashtag Tulane18 to post some of your photos and things. We'd love to see you share photos of your family celebrating this great milestone. So give us just a second. We'll go through the questions. So let's see. So I think we've answered a couple of these maybe since you submitted them. But yeah, if a student is in 2 different schools, they're double majoring, then they can choose which ceremony they want to attend. And they may do that based more about who they want to be sitting next to and how many friends they have in either school and kind of which group they prefer to be in. And so they will make that decision when they're choosing their cap and gown. They'll get that information too. Is that correct, Kate?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep, that's exactly right.
Okay. So then, so Wave Goodbye, yes, that is that party. That's on Friday night. And parents and any guests can attend that with the student as long as you've got an e-ticket for each person in your party. So everybody does have to have that. You can't have it on your phone. They actually have to print it out. So if you have more than 7 people in your family's party, but your student's roommate only has 2 people coming with them, then that person can share their extra tickets. So that's another thing that I hear students doing the last couple of weeks before Wave Goodbye is coming about, is they start kind of networking with their friends to kind of figure out how many tickets they can find. So the locations for all of those different ceremonies is listed on that slide. The location for the A.B. Freeman Business School commencement ceremony is the Devlin Fieldhouse, which is on campus. And that space seats about 3,000 people, I think. So it's not, it's pretty much enough seating for, everybody in the business school and their family parties. So you don't have to worry about that. So we've mentioned a couple of the things that are in this, some of these questions. So again, kind of looking at that main page of the schedule, you'll get an idea of how much time you have between the unified ceremony and the school commencement. For the business school folks, yours are on 2 separate days, so it gives you plenty of time to fit in those great dinners and lunches, fabulous restaurants, or if you're going to cater something or have a picnic or something in some great location in New Orleans, then you've got a little bit more time. For the others of you, look on those schedules. Make sure you note the details below the headlines, because the ceremony start time is in the headline, but the lining up time or the time that you need to arrive and check in is going to be listed below that. So make sure that you're keeping that in mind when you're kind of planning your schedule. So I'm not sure if a student has 2 majors from 2 different schools and there's enough time for them to get to both ceremonies. If they can attend, I think they can only walk in one of the graduation ceremonies of the undergraduate schools, but they might be able to attend the other one. I think that would be a question they should ask the people in the dean's office of their own school. But I think even if they could fit that in physically, I don't think that they can walk in more than one graduation ceremony. And that's the terminology we use. We call the unified commencement ceremony the big festive event in the Superdome. That's for everyone. And then the separate school ceremonies are the graduation ceremonies. So just to help you kind of distinguish between those. So somebody's kind of concerned about being able to actually see their student graduate, but really these venues are good sizes for these different things. The Superdome is humongous. It's like an 80,000 seat arena, isn't it? So when we say that it starts to fill up, I think what Valerie probably means is the lower seats fill up.
Well, we don't use the whole Superdome. We use like less than half of it, because we've got to have a stage and a backstage and, all of that. So there are a lot of seats, but the Superdome goes very high.
Yes.
And we don't normally open except for 2 sections. And there are a lot of good seats. I think that we have probably about 15,000 seats. It really kind of depends on the staging and how much we have to drape off, which changes depending on the platform party and the faculty numbers and things like that.
I think the other thing to just mention, to kind of give you a little bit more context and background, is that unified ceremony is very much about sort of the spectacle and the pomp and circumstance. There's a lot of performance to it. There's a lot of music. That's where the main, guest kind of celebrity speaker is. And then these graduation ceremonies are, except for the liberal arts one, they're in other venues, but those venues fit the size of that school. And over time, we know, about what size that audience is going to be with the school, the number of students who are in it, and then, calculating for their family and guests. And so that's the more intimate ceremony where you will actually see your student walk across the stage. So those are in other spaces. And you can see the students that are there. When, for that one school who will also graduate in the Superdome, as other people are leaving the dome, then the parents of that school that's having their ceremony probably move down into the lower seats so they're closer to the stage and they can see that. But when the other groups are in their other spaces, it's a lot more intimate. And that is more where you see your own student walk across the stage, and then somebody will also be there to capture that in a photograph. So I hope that kind of helps you anticipate what the difference is and what the feel will be like at those different events. So, so here's another question about wave goodbye. So we've mentioned this before. They can kind of share their tickets with friends, but they cannot be purchased. So it's not like we have an extra store of them to give away, but students can kind of network with their friends to pick up some extra tickets.
This is a free event for graduates and their families or friends. They get 7 tickets that all they have to do is download them, and they'll get food. We have wine and beer is available for sale, but everything else, all the food and beverages are at no cost.
And other is not open to the public at all.
No.
I mean, Tulane faculty and staff don't get tickets unless a student would give us one of theirs. And so it is definitely planned and created for the graduating class and their guests. So another question was whether there is a reception after the science and engineering ceremony. And I don't see that in the information that we received from their school coordinator. So I would say let's go with what is in the slides, but you might want to ask your student to check with their dean's office or to watch their own email for more information coming from their school. There are, still some event details being worked out, and so there may be things that are added to that commencement.tulane.edu website. So I would say it would be smart to check that again mid-March, then maybe check it again in early April, and then check it at the beginning of May, before you come down. Let's see. So is there a special entrance at the Superdome for people with pacemakers since they can't go through a metal detector?
Yes, and that would be the gate A ground level, which is the entrance that you see from Poydras Street. You would have to identify that issue when you come in, because usually they try to turn people around and get them where they're supposed to be. But you could use gate A ground and go up the escalator to the seating.
So Valerie, here's another Superdome question. Is it possible to arrange for a private reception for a family in a suite at the Superdome?
No. This question does come up occasionally, but we're using all of the space throughout the day, because those are the areas where the students. Now, if you have your own suite or you know someone who has a suite, yes, you can. But the big suites that are the lounges, we're using all of that space. If you have your own suite or someone's letting you use their space, you can do that, and you would need to do that directly with the Superdome.
But those other really big spaces, you're using to line the students up and everything,
yes,
correct?
And afterwards for receptions.
Right.
And also, I don't think we mentioned, but the social work ceremony, which is very small, is in one of those club lounge areas. They have smaller ceremony, but it is in the Superdome at 12 o'clock.
Okay. So what's the recommended dress code? And I'm imagining this means for the, I can definitely say at the wave goodbye ceremony, the wave goodbye party, you would see a little bit of everything. People come pretty casually dressed to that, but I've also seen groups who look like they probably have dinner reservations after that event. They're using that event as more like their hors d'oeuvres, and then they're going to go somewhere afterwards. So you might see some people who are a little bit more dressed up.
Yes.
I do think the comfortable walking shoes is important though, because you're going to be on the grass. But otherwise for the graduation and the unified commencement ceremonies, what would you say is the recommended dress code?
Usually the audience comes, in a little dressier. I mean, a lot of times the men will wear jackets. We don't really have a dress code, but just by the nature of it being a formal kind of ceremony, you don't want to come in your shorts and flip-flops. But that's really it. And if it's the students, they're in a robe, so it doesn't really matter as long as they're clothed.
So, Kate, here's a question for you about the shuttles. Is the shuttle bus used for the students as well on Saturday morning? So it is. Students could take the shuttle.
Yeah, the shuttle starts at 7 a.m., so as long as your student's on one of those first loops, they'll get there in time to line up.
And that's really helpful for the students who live near the Uptown campus or who are still residing on campus. So you don't have to come get them and take them to the Superdome if, for instance, you're staying in a hotel, down in the Central Business District or in the Quarter or something. But if you were also uptown somewhere in a bed and breakfast or Airbnb or something, then you might prefer to use the shuttle from campus instead of
They leave from the Dival garage. So, and again, there are maps and things that we will have for you so you can see exactly where that is. One thing to note is that if your student arrives and is inebriated, he will not be allowed he or she will not be allowed on the bus.
Okay. So here's a question, again about the Superdome. Can we bring food into the Superdome between ceremonies?
No, there's no food allowed to be brought from outside. They do have, stadium food available. They also have some healthier things like, a few salads and things like that. So you can get something to eat there, and they don't allow any food or beverage.
You can't have water bottles or anything.
Yeah,
okay.
Nothing. They'll take that away from you.
Okay. Let's see. Another question was, let's see here. What date do the newspapers list the graduates? I have to admit, I do not know exactly. Do you know, Valerie?
It runs the Sunday after, so it'll be in there the next day. They actually issued that on Friday once they have the final number and names and everything.
So here's another question. If the student is getting 2 degrees, liberal arts school and science and engineering, I'm assuming 2 diplomas are sent to the house and up to the family which one you want to frame. So yes, that would be correct. Here's a really nice comment from somebody who said that they have enjoyed our webinars and wishes that all universities would do that. Well, you just made my day, so thank you. Thank you, Julie, for submitting that nice comment. So the next question is, when is the Newcomb Scholars Ceremony? So that is not listed on this main, usually on Friday. 4 in McAllister. Okay, so your student would get a lot of information from the Newcomb Institute staff as well about that, but that's what we've been told, 4 o'clock on Friday. Are the gowns standard college graduation gowns? If you already have one, you have to purchase one, but they're Tulane.
Yes, they're custom
gowns.
Tulane regalia, so your student will need a Tulane cap and gown to walk in Tulane commencement.
It actually has the Tulane shield embroidered on it, doesn't it? Okay. Do most students usually attend both the unified ceremony and their school ceremony? And these 2 ladies with me are vigorously shaking their heads yes. And I do think it's because of what's distinctive about the way we do commencement. And because the unified ceremony, we had an interim vice president for student affairs here a couple of years who had worked in universities for over 30 years. And he said, I've been to decades of commencement ceremonies and I've never seen anything like Tulane's ceremony. So it's very festive, so memorable. It's just such an event. And so that has one whole feel to it. So people don't want to miss that. And then they want to go to their individual academic school ceremony because it does have that more intimate feel. That's where they are going to get their diploma. They actually walk across the stage. You will hear their name called out and all of that. So you just get the best of both worlds, I think. So I would say that Most students do, cut of both. Are there any events during the weekend for the graduate who has a parent who is an alumnus? That is a great question, and I don't think that we do. There are some schools that hold their alumni reunions during commencement weekend, but we don't do that. We have alumni reunions with homecoming and family weekend in the fall. So that's a great question, but I don't think so. If you did just want to connect with the alumni affairs staff and other people from the Alumni Association, they will be at the Wave Goodbye party from 6 to 8, and that's the group that's going to be giving out those special free gift posters. So stop by Cud Hall and you might be able to connect with them. But in terms of reunions, class groups, that kind of thing, nothing formal is planned. So let's see here. So a question is SLAM under Liberal Arts or Business? So that is the School of Liberal Arts Management Minor. That's what SLAM stands for. It's SALAMM, 2 M's. So that's under liberal arts. So.
And if you or your student have any question about which degree which school their degree falls under, at GradFest, we'll have a representative from the registrar's office who will be able to answer all those kinds of questions.
Yes, so they know, oh, I'm an English major, but I don't really think about what school that's in.
And there's a lot of students who never think about it and have no idea.
Right,
so.
Because they identify more with their major than maybe their school, especially if they're in liberal arts or if they're in science and engineering. So they'll be there to help them figure that out. Any information regarding the second line umbrellas that you see people carrying? Valerie, do you have any info?
Yes.
Okay.
We order 250 umbrellas that we pass out to the students on the floor at the end of the unified ceremony. And it's just kind of a random thing that they just kind of like reach out and give them to random people. It's not something
kind of like catching beads at a Mardi Gras
parade or deliberated or anything like that. And so that happens right at the very end, and the music playing is like a second line strut, and they march out with their umbrellas. There are some students or parents that want to make sure their students have umbrellas, and we can provide you with the name. It's actually a family operation, small operation, but they make all of the umbrellas for us, handmade every year. I'll get you the price on that. I believe it's about $70.
That's what I've heard too.
And I'm not sure if that's the current price or not, but I can put you in touch with her and we can get you that information.
So Valerie, if you send me that information, I'll include it in the message that I send the parents when I send them the link to the webinar in the PDF. So some students make their own, and yes, a lot of them decorate their caps. And I saw one person was asking, will they get their cap and gown at GradFest? And yes, they do, which gives them time to decorate it if they want to do that. Let's see, let me get back to some of these other questions. Yes, everybody will get a link to the recording of this webinar if you want to go through it again. Valerie, do you know if the unified commencement ceremony is simulcast? Is it live streamed? Or is it
live streamed?
So it's live streamed.
Yes.
And so that the live stream link will live on that commencement.tulane.edu website. So they may have a placeholder tab for that on the website now, or it'll pop up when it's closer to the event time. So if you've got a family who can't come into town to see everything, they can watch it that way. And usually there will end up being a video of at least the main speaker.
Is sold. A video of the event is sold.
Yeah, we actually do sell that, and your student can pre-order the DVD of Commencement at GradFest, or they can place that order in the bookstore at any time.
And there is also a form in the printed program that if you wanted to do it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And the students do wear the cap and gown for the individual academic school graduation diploma ceremonies as well. So yes, they need that regalia for both ceremonies. So one parent asked about walking in more than one graduation ceremony, and so I would say I would have your student ask at the dean's offices of both schools, but that's just it's not a question I've come across before. I've usually known students choosing one or the other.
Yeah, at GradFest and then on our website after the event, we'll have a list of those commencement coordinators for each school. So your student can either reach out to their dean's office or reach out to that coordinator directly to kind of see how all that will work.
Can undergraduate students' siblings stay in the dorm until after graduation? And I'm pretty sure that that answer is no. But your student could call the housing office or walk by there. It's the HRL, Housing and Residence Life Office. I'm pretty sure they don't allow siblings under 18 for visits. And during that time between finals and graduation, I'm not sure that that's allowed. So that office is on the first floor of Irby. Their email address is just, I think it's housing@tulane.edu. So I would say, contact them to get a definitive answer about that. Let's see, do you know if the diploma is mailed in a tube through the post office or if it's a flat kind of package?
Different schools use different media to package, so some of them have tubes and some of them have the flat mail.
It will come by FedEx and not the Postal Service, and from what I understand, they are very carefully packaged, so make sure that you or your student read the instructions of how to actually open the package to prevent damaging the diploma, but they do arrive safe and sound through FedEx.
Where do the shuttles on campus will pick people up in the street that's between the Riley Center and the
parking garage.
Parking garage. And then we had a question about if taxis can drop off people at the Superdome.
Absolutely. There's a lot of taxis that pull in there and drop people off, and also after the ceremony, we arrange for there to be a lot of taxis in the area so people can catch them.
So the individual diploma ceremonies are probably about an hour to an hour and a half.
The larger schools are closer to 2 hours.
Okay.
A lot of names to call.
So like engineering
and business
and liberal arts. Okay.
Those are like 500-600 students.
Okay. And then let's see here. Are there specific additional regalia for athletes, honor students, sororities, or things that the graduates wear? And do they order those at GradFest?
Those won't be ordered at GradFest. Those individual organizations, whether it's the school or your student sorority or fraternity or their team, they will be in touch with the student about any other additional regalia.
And so some of the honor societies also have cords or things that they, or medal type things that they wear on a ribbon or something. And so, instead of coming from the general GradFest, they get those directly from those departments or organizations.
Right.
Are there any formal events planned for the seniors between the end of finals and graduation weekend? I think that really now that we've done the wave goodbye party, that's kind of become the big event that happens before commencement. Is that right?
Yes. Unless some of the individual schools are doing something, I don't know of any formal activities.
Yeah.
It's all pretty much left for that weekend.
Let's see. Do they allow you to leave after your student has received their diploma? You must be somebody with a name that falls early in the alphabet. Now, being Penny Wyatt, I love the people whose last names were Young or started with C's because I was always waiting for my name to be called. So I think it's more no or yes, or what do you think? No. So just to keep it from getting to be noisy as people leave and all that, it's just respectful to kind of wait the whole time.
Right. I mean, they're not going to stop you at the door if you do it, but just out of respect for the other students and the disruption, they ask that you stay till the end of the ceremony.
And decorating mortarboards is fine. I mean, they can do that however they wish. We see some beautifully clever designs. I love to see those every year, and they recycle things and use lots of glitter and Mardi Gras beads. If nothing else, your student has learned how to use glitter while they've been here for 4 years. So, let's see. So here's a question for you, Kate. are the students able to signify their honor status, or if they're graduating like summa cum laude on the invitations?
That's something that your student will have to check with Balfour directly at GradFest. I don't think honors are printed on there, but again, that's something to definitely ask the announcement people about.
And the registrar's office.
And the registrar, yes.
And they would know those answers as well.
Yes, exactly.
So, I think we've come to the end of the questions. I'll call last call because it's well after 8 years, so we want to wrap up. If you want to type in any final comment here, you can. Or please remember that I love to hear feedback from you about the webinars. So if you have feedback about this particular webinar or any of the other ones that you've seen in the time that you've been a Tulane parent, then please send that directly to me at parents@tulane.edu. But remember from this previous slide, if you have questions specifically about commencement, then you've got a dedicated email address to use, tugrad@tulane.edu. So I just want to thank all of you parents for participating in the webinars and for your interest, for your support of your student and your commitment to Tulane. It's been a pleasure to work with you over the years and get to know you and hopefully support you in supporting your student. So I just want you to know that we really do appreciate our Tulane parents. And we consider you part of the Tulane family, and I hope that you will have a wonderful time when you come visit for commencement. And we just thank you again for everything you've done for Tulane and for your student during these years. So I will wrap things up here now and just tell you to watch your email probably tomorrow afternoon or so. I'll send you that information about the umbrella ordering possibility and the link to watch this again if you'd like, and the PDF of the slides. So thanks again, everyone, and have a